evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I am Heena Gambhir. Let's tell you what's happening in Ukraine. It is day 13 of Russia's assault on Ukraine. Russia has stepped up on-ground attack on prominent Ukrainian cities. Currently under fire are cities like Kharkiv in the east, Sumy in the northeast, Gostomel, which is near the capital city, and a few cities in the southwest. No positive development has been there so far on peace talks between the two countries as Russian aggression continues. Nearly 1.7 million Ukrainians have fled their own country. Meanwhile, the long Russian armored column threatening Kyiv remains stalled. On the other hand, 21 civilians, including 2 children, died in an airstrike on Ukrainian city Sumy, which is east of capital Kyiv. In another ceasefire, Russia opened up new humanitarian corridors to allow Ukrainians to leave. The exit corridors include some of the worst affected cities like Kyiv, Sumy, Kharkiv and Mariupol. Indian government has announced that all Indian students have been evacuated from Sumy and are on the way to the safer locations, especially in western Ukraine, from where they will be boarding the trains. The Indian government has also urged Indians who are stranded in Ukraine to use the new humanitarian corridors that have been opened up to leave the country and return home. Ukraine claims Russia has held 3 lakh civilians as hostage in Mariupol and that 1 child died of dehydration, accusing Russia of war crimes and a deliberate strategy to torture Ukrainians. Not just this, in a fresh economic attack, the European Commission has prepared a new package of sanctions against Russia and Belarus. The sanctions are intended to target 3 Belarusian banks. In fact, this along with Russian oligarchs as well as the politicians. Not just this, energy giant Shell has said that it will stop buying oil and natural gas from Russia. It will shut down its service stations and other operations in Russia as well, amid the international pressure for companies to sever ties over the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And as America threatens to ban the import of Russian oil and gas, Russia has hit back. Russia's deputy prime minister has warned of catastrophic consequences if Russian oil is rejected by the world, especially the West. He said that the surge in prices would be unpredictable. It would be $300 per barrel. And now we are getting to know that US President Joe Biden is likely to announce a ban on Russian oil and gas tonight itself. What would it really mean for the world? How real are Moscow's claims as far as crude oil price surge is concerned if Russian oil, in fact, is banned by the United States of America? Let's find out. Joining us on the broadcast right now are my guests. We have Saurabh Chandra, former Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Sharma, former Chairman, ONGC, joining us. Nathan Piper, who is Head of Oil and Gas Research at Investec, is also live with us this evening. Thank you very much, all of you gentlemen, for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Mr. Saurabh Chandra, I want to begin the discussion with you. The latest that we are getting to know is that US President Joe Biden may actually announce the ban on Russian oil, import of Russian oil tonight itself. Europe clearly is not very convinced with this kind of a proposal, so US might decide to go alone. What would it really mean for the oil market?
I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, and several million barrels of oil go out of the market, there is going to be trouble. What it would mean for the prices is unpredictable. It'll be a brave man who will guess how high they could go. To start with, there would be sentiments, because the disruption in demand and supply will take little time. But an alternative mode of payment would have to be found. And Iran oil is one option. It will still take some time, but it's time it was brought into the picture. It was brought into the market. Venezuela is the other place from where oil can be exported, but that again will take time. So let us hope it doesn't happen. And especially for gas, if it does happen, Europe would feel a huge crunch. There is no alternative to supply of gas to Europe. LNG is not really an option. One, there's not enough quantity. Two, it's priced very high. As it is, the electricity rates in Europe are shooting up. Therefore, one just hopes it doesn't happen.
Okay, we all are hoping that it does not really happen, but the situation is slightly different because the latest is that US President Joe Biden may actually go ahead and ban Russian oil and gas, even though it does not really depend too much on Russian oil and gas. And as you correctly mentioned, sir, it's the European Union which will be severely hit. It gets about 40% of its gas and 30% of its oil from Russia. Mr. R.S. Sharma, what do you make of the claim that has been made by Moscow that if indeed West bans Russian oil, if there is a restriction on Russian oil and gas, then the price of crude could actually spiral towards $300 a barrel. The prospect of it took the crude price to $139 a barrel. Then, of course, it came back. Do you think if it actually happens, 300 is something that can be a possibility?
Well, that is a hypothetical number. I would not be able to endorse the number per se, but in substance, I would say that in case the Russian oil stops to flow or stops to get exported, the global supply capacity cannot meet that shortfall. When I say cannot meet that shortfall, because I have been tracking this news quite a lot, no other country is in a position to meet that shortfall, and that near that apprehension that if that happens, it is we can see that this volatility in the prices. As it is, without oil and gas having been directly put under sanction, I understand what I read from the news, global news items, that about 70% of this Russian oil is not able to get exported because of the payments problems. So indirectly, those sanctions are affecting the Western countries themselves, the global community. So that's a too scary situation. And the spike in the prices that we have seen in recent days, it is unprecedented. Though President Putin says 300, but I would say in substance, what he says, the message is very loud and clear, whether it is 300 or it is 150 plus or it is 185, 200, it is anybody's guess. But the fact remains, the global supplies elsewhere would not be able to meet the shortfall. Let it be very clear. And that is a really alarming for an import-dependent country like India, because we import 85% of our domestic consumption. So that is a very scary, very worrisome the situation for us over here. And now, when these price increases will get passed on to consumer, the cascading effect and the implications, I wouldn't go into all those things, but they are quite worrisome.
Okay, global supply capacity can't meet the shortfall. That's your point of view. Nathan Piper, yes. What would a US ban on Russian oil really mean? Because Germany and Netherlands had already rejected this proposal when it was first considered on Monday. But tonight we are likely to see Biden administration go ahead and ban Russian oil. That's what many reports are currently indicating. So if it indeed happens, what does it mean for the world in your opinion?
Well, I think actually the US, the UK and Canada have all either intimated or are actually going through with banning imports of Russian oil. But I think what these things are performative efforts. Like the amount of Russian oil that any of those three countries actually imports is negligible. And I think the risk is here that the geopolitical tension is increased by the threat of increased sanctions. As you pointed out, a lot of the European off-takers can't really do that. They couldn't survive. What we're seeing are those countries that can quite easily do without Russian crude talking the situation up, increasing oil prices, and really the worst of both cases happening. So oil prices get pushed up, Moscow is able to make the same amount of money, in fact more money, and so no one is really happy with the outcome. Russia is the third largest producer globally and exports around 5 million barrels a day. As some of the speakers have already mentioned, industry is self-sanctioning. So there are banks, there are shipping companies and others that will not deal in Russian crude. So we're already seeing some of these barrels potentially taken off the market or at least going to other places. With the Russian crude, the Urals, which is the main benchmark in Russia, being traded at something like a 30% discount or $30 discount to Brent, when it normally trades roughly in line. So we are seeing alarming swings in the oil and UK and European gas prices. But that's because we are now in an economic war. We now are in a very serious situation, which we believe will see high oil and gas prices for quite some time to come. And as previous speakers have mentioned, from an Indian point of view, that is a crucial and a worrisome development. So, the actual announcement that the US, Canada, and the UK will not any longer import Russian crude is really neither here nor there. But what we are seeing is increasing economic tensions, increasing focus from the EU to try and move away from Russian oil and gas. But the reality of it is they can't. But as talk of sanctions continues, I think prices will continue to rise.
Okay, Mr. Chandra, now we understand that the kind of reserves that the United States of America has right now, I'm sure it will be able to secure its own needs. Do you think that's the reason why US is pushing for this kind of a move and trying to convince other countries as well? But what can really be done by a country like India to insulate itself in a situation like this? If this announcement actually comes tonight, what can the importers really do to protect themselves?
Oil has a global price. So the price is going to hit us. And there is not much that one can do except perhaps find a way to buy Russian oil. We can sort out the payment issues, we can perhaps get Russian oil at a discount, although getting Russian oil logistically to India is going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult. We don't get too much oil from Russia or LNG from Russia. So it is not the quantity which matters, it is the price that's going to hit us. The price, since will track either Brent, 50% of the trade is done in Brent. So it's a difficult proposition for India. We import about 4.7 million barrels a day. The annual import is about 1.5 billion barrels. So 1.5 billion barrels, if the price goes up by $10, it means $15 billion. Now, as it is, we have a trade deficit. This trade deficit is going to be a problem. The rupee is already weakening, and it'll hit the current account deficit. It'll hit the fiscal, it'll hit the monetary policy because prices will go up. So it's generally a difficult situation, but that is what wars do. They create tough times for all countries, and the way we are interlinked now, we are going to feel the impact of it.
Okay, so the impact is definitely going to be there. That's what Mr. Chandra is telling us. Mr. R. Sharma, what is your point of view on the current scenario? What can India really do at this point in time? Because even though for us, one thing is clear, supply disruption won't be a cause of concern, but the price is going to hit us. And in many ways, can India really do something to protect its own interests?
Firstly, I fully endorse the views expressed by Mr. Chandra. I'm very happy that he's so candid. When he used to be in position, he used to be more guarded. But I'm so happy. This is a realist situation he has posed. And I shudder to think that what lies ahead for our nation. I have already, by 2 decades experiences, we are facing unprecedented kind of challenges. So it will going to be very cascading effect on for the economy. The pricing itself, well, India has enough forex resources, so funding that imports is not an issue. But thing is, as rightly mentioned by Mr. Chandra, it's a global commodity. At the prices, are these prices affordable? Who will pay for these high prices? Can these prices be passed on? Can today 20 rupees per liter on petrol, diesel, can it be passed on to the consumer? I'm sure government is fighting with this dilemma, how to manage this. The story today morning, the Times of India carried a news that these marketing companies have agreed to pass on 6 rupees per liter immediately and absorb 12 rupees under recoveries themselves. That is at the Indian basket at 111, 112. With the prices have already shot up this thing. And the futuristic scenario that is coming, whatever Putin says, even otherwise, my own call. I have been saying that consistently, even before this Ukraine crisis. I have been saying oil prices are going to go up consistently. There are different reasons for that, whether it is a climate lobby, new production not coming, new investments not happening, oil and gas projects not getting funded. There are different challenges. And these lobbyists, environment lobby people, they are not able to visualize that energy is the prime mover for any economic activity. Will the economic activities come to a halt? I'm deeply worried for our economy because the way we are projected now to grow, and this is going to have a very severe dampening effect on our all growth plans. As it is, the situation is bad. In case it gets worse, I'm unable to visualize what is going to happen.
Okay, I'll go across to Nathan in just a bit, but before that, once again, coming back to you, Mr. Saurabh Chandra, today only the oil minister said that, oil prices are determined by global prices. We will take decisions in the best interest of our citizens. So do you think government appears to be, in a way, trying to intervene into the current situation so that the consumers are not immediately impacted? What do you make of the statement that he gave us today? Because the prices are linked to the market. So the government, of course, shouldn't be doing a lot in terms of directly controlling the prices.
You see, governments have 2 levers. One is the excise duty, which is specific, and the other is state VAT, which is ad valorem. Now, there is a limit to which they can reduce either the excise duty or state VAT. Question is, where will it be compensated from? We bear the pain in the present or borrow and transfer the pain to the future. That is the choice. Those choices the government can exercise. Otherwise, in the old days, there was an under-recovery on diesel, huge under-recovery, which was funded partially by the government, partially by upstream companies, and to some extent borne by downstream and midstream companies. Now, the government does not have the fiscal space to give a subsidy, as I look at it, because it can only come from borrowing. As it is, the borrowing is very huge this year. The interest is taking up a very large portion of the revenue budget. So where will this money come from? Per force, it will have to be passed on the consumer, and that we have to be prepared for. These are extraordinary situations beyond the control of anybody.
Well, that's right, because we are also in a situation when the global economy was, beginning to get back to normalcy. Now, Nathan Piper, you've heard the concerns here that India has, as our experts have just now suggested. But when there is this clear understanding that this move by Biden administration is going to plunge the world economy into crisis, why would US really take such a step?
Well, I suppose they feel, given the actions that Russia has taken into Ukraine, that they have to make a stand. The West, NATO is not going to go into Ukraine on the ground or put people in harm's way. So they feel they have to put maximum economic pressure on Russia, and clearly Russia's big export is oil and gas. But I think I suppose the lesson of history is whether we look at Venezuela or Iran, which have both been mentioned already. Severe sanctions have been put on both of those countries, which even related to their energy sectors, and that hasn't necessarily got the outcome that the US wanted. So I think that as events unfold in Ukraine, further pressure needs to be put on. But I guess the other thing to mention, that we haven't really touched on completely, is that the oil and gas markets were very tight before the geopolitical tensions took off in Russia. So already we had global oil inventories down to lows that we hadn't seen since 2014. We are seeing declining spare capacity from OPEC, particularly as they unwind their production cut from 2020, and US shale not growing. And so overall, we had quite a tight oil and gas picture for 2022 anyway. So when you add on the geopolitical tensions that we've seen, really are set for a number of years of high oil prices and high gas prices. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, particularly for an oil importer like India, but we really are in for a tough spell here.
Just very quickly, what is your estimate if indeed this announcement is made by the US president today, if indeed the Russian oil, is banned by US, UK and Canada, where do you see crude really heading?
Well, that's kind of already happened. That's in the money. So the oil price has begun to tick up above $130 a barrel. So that is taking that into consideration. As I mentioned at the start, these are very nominal volumes that these three countries import. I think the crucial thing is that Europe is not able to really follow that up and put some real pressure on energy exports from Russia yet. But I think as we see industry and business and various different services not allow those Russian barrels to flow into the global markets, if that continues, then we can only see prices go higher. Now, $300, I think as one of the contributors already said, whether it's 300, 150 or 185, that's a lot of global pain for energy prices, and I think it's going to have much wider implications than what President Biden can cut when he announced.
And no economy clearly is ready to bear this kind of pain if indeed this happens. Thank you very much, gentlemen, all of you, for joining us here on Urban Debate on this very, very important issue. What really happens next? We'll keep you updated on that particular story. Nathan Piper, R.S. Sharma, as well as Saurabh Chandra. Appreciate all of you for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening.